It was 2:33 in the morning when the operations center aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln lit up with an alarm nobody had been expecting. Dozens of unidentified signals flickered onto the radar, lingered for a few seconds, and vanished. Somewhere out in the darkness, something was closing in on a convoy of oil tankers moving through the busiest shipping corridor on Earth, and if the crew misread what they were looking at, or reacted even minutes too late, the fallout wouldn't stay contained to these waters. While the Abraham Lincoln Strike Group held its patrol in the Gulf of Oman, guarding the sea lanes on the far side of the strait, Iran's Revolutionary Guard had quietly switched on a plan years in the making. 136 Shahed-136 drones lifted off almost at once from camouflaged mobile launchers scattered along the Iranian coast. The moment they were airborne, they dropped low, just a few meters above the waves, and melted into the black water below, nearly invisible from any distance. Rather than moving as one mass, Iranian coordinators split the swarm into several independent clusters, each approaching from a different bearing, building a scattered web of targets that tightened slowly around the world's most vital oil corridor. The logic was simple. Overload the American defense network with too many simultaneous decisions, and force every interception call to cost precious seconds. By 2:40, the Arleigh Burke-class destroyers screening the convoy were picking up faint contacts at the edge of their radar. There one moment, gone the next, only to reappear somewhere else minutes later. At first, nobody could say for certain what they were seeing, but as the number of contacts kept climbing, confusion turned into certainty. This was an attack. General quarters sounded aboard the Abraham Lincoln. On the combat displays, a cluster of bright points was closing on the tanker convoy, the gap shrinking fast enough that no one doubted what was coming. An E-2D Hawkeye patrolling south of the strait was immediately redirected toward the contact field, and within minutes its data, cross-checked against the radars on the destroyers, confirmed what the fleet feared. This wasn't sensor noise, it was a coordinated wave of Shahed-136, converging on the shipping lane from multiple directions at once. At 2:55, with the scale of the assault becoming clear, the strike group commander scrambled the ready response. Two F-35C Lightning IIs launched off the deck and pushed north to widen the surveillance picture, while the destroyers kept refining the speed, heading, and position of every inbound track. One of the F-35 pilots picked up a second cluster of activity near Keshem Island, separate from the wave already heading for the strait, still gathered close to the coast. The first imagery, beamed back, showed more Shahed-136 being readied beside hidden launch trailers along the shoreline. Reading this as the opening of a second wave, the fleet moved to get ahead of it. 4 MH-60R Seahawks, armed with laser-guided rockets, lifted off from the escort ships and raced toward the inbound formation. As the helicopters closed the gap, the first wave kept boring in toward the tankers, and on the far side of the strait, the launchers near Keshem hadn't gone quiet. By 3:06, the Seahawks were in range of the first intercept zone. From a safe standoff distance, the air crews opened fire, and one by one the Shahed signatures began winking out on the fleet's display as explosions lit the dark water below. Within minutes, a large portion of the first wave had been wiped out. But something in the wreckage caught the attention of intelligence officers almost immediately. Many of the downed drones were carrying only a token explosive payload, while their airframes had been fitted with extra radar reflectors to make them look bigger and more threatening on enemy scopes. The implication was clear. Part of that first wave hadn't been sent to hit anything. It had been sent to be noticed, to pull the fleet's full attention onto itself. The suspicion was confirmed almost at once. While the Seahawks chased down the remnants of the first group, the F-35s and the Hawkeye picked up a fresh swarm of contacts forming near Keshem Island. Within minutes, 8 more Shahed-136s launched and turned toward the strait from an entirely new angle. This time refusing to fly as a single pack, instead splintering into smaller cells, each one choosing its own approach corridor. From the command post on Keshem, Iranian coordinators were trying to pull the American defenses in two directions at once. Concentrate too hard on the first axis of attack, and the second wave would find the seam. Spread too thin across both, and neither intercept effort would carry real weight. While the destroyers and aircraft scrambled to rebalance, a handful of survivors from the first wave slipped through the outer screen and kept pressing toward the tankers, a small number, but a real one. By 3:18, what had begun as a single raid had clearly become something larger, a deliberate, layered saturation attack. While the fleet's attention was pulled toward the new approach vectors, Two Mohijer-6 drones loitered quietly offshore, far enough back to stay safe, close enough to watch everything, feeding a constant stream of battlefield data back to the command post on Chesham, so that every time a Shahed went down, Iranian controllers could nudge the survivors' flight paths in response. 20 minutes into the engagement, though, Iranian commanders could see their plan wasn't holding up. American interceptors were reacting faster than expected, and the drone losses kept climbing. To buy the remaining drones a fighting chance, the Revolutionary Guard activated its electronic warfare units out of Bandar Abbas and Qeshm Island, and almost immediately, some of the American tracking displays began to stutter, brief, momentary dropouts that lasted only seconds, but were enough to muddy a battle picture already crowded with targets approaching from every direction. Iranian controllers seized the opening, rerouting a cluster of drones around the heaviest intercept activity and back onto a path toward the tanker convoy, closing the distance faster than the fleet had planned for. Once the jamming became unmistakable, the strike group played its next card. An EA-18G Growler attached to the group launched and took up station over the southern strait, hunting for the signal sources behind the interference. By 3:30, as Iran's jamming tried to clear a lane for its surviving drones, the Growler had already begun pinpointing individual emitters around Bandar Abbas and Qeshm, and new markers started populating the American display. Nearly half an hour into the fight, most of the Shahed force had already been cut down on the outer defensive lines. But the engagement wasn't finished. 4 drones remained, barely a minute out from the convoy, having punched through the first layers of defense. With the threat now in its final stage, fleet commanders made a deliberate choice. Faster, more precise missiles could have ended it instantly, but the fleet chose to keep using lower-cost interceptors against Iran's cheap drones, proving the point that effective defense didn't require burning through expensive munitions to do it. At 3:44, the Seahawks operating ahead of the formation were sent in for one more pass, firing rockets in quick succession at the low-flying targets, bringing down one drone almost immediately, while a second vanished from the screen moments later as it tried and failed to dodge the incoming fire. The last 2 kept coming. As they closed in, the destroyers opened up directly with their deck guns, knocking one down just a few kilometers out, while the final drone pressed on alone. And in the last seconds before it could reach the danger zone, a concentrated burst of fire tore into its fuselage, detonating it in midair before it hit the water. By 4 a.m., the last signal had disappeared from the radar. All 20 Shahed-136 drones involved in the assault had been destroyed, and the tanker convoy sailed on without a scratch. But for the American fleet, the real prize of the night wasn't the kill count. It was everything they'd quietly recorded while the fight was happening. Every data link from the Mohijer-6 drones, every jamming signal out of Bandar Abbas and Qeshm, had been captured, cross-referenced, and traced back to its source in real time. And by the time the shooting stopped, electronic warfare specialists already knew exactly where the command center behind the whole operation was sitting. One of the destroyers received the order, and a cruise missile rose out of its launch cell and streaked low across the water toward Qeshm Island, where Iranian coordinators were still reviewing the wreckage of their failed operation. Minutes later, the island lit up with a single massive explosion, and the command and communications network that had coordinated the entire swarm attack was gone. Years of investment erased in one strike, every screen going dark at once. Iran's drone swarm program, built as a tool to pressure the world through the Strait of Hormuz, had taken a crippling hit on its very first large-scale outing. But this was a fight the U.S. fleet won because it only had 20 drones to deal with and just enough time to bring each layer of its defense online in sequence. The real question is what happens when that number isn't 20, but 200, launched at once from multiple coastlines and islands, converging on the strait from every direction simultaneously. Could a layered, multi-billion-dollar naval defense network still hold the line? Or does a night like this one mark the moment naval warfare quietly entered a new era, one where cheap, mass-produced weapons can put even the most advanced fleet in the world on the back foot?